put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. I got this either as a present or I got it on discount, so I did not pay very much money for this and am thus not bitter on account of that. Abuse, 1993 video game for the PC. Game review. And let's see if I can get, there we go. There we go. And starting with plot. And this is straight from Wikipedia. The protagonist of the game, Nick Vrenna, has been unjustly incarcerated in a prison where the staff are performing unethical medical experiments upon the inmates. A prison riot occurs and an experiment goes horribly wrong. People inside the prison, except for Nick, who seems to be immune, isn't that always the way in games like this? Left 4 Dead, anyway, get infected with a substance called abuse, that transforms them into monsters. With the water supply in danger of being infected, Nick arms himself and fights through the horde to prevent this, and then escapes from the prison complex. And yeah, this is what the game itself says the plot is as well. But then I found one FAQ for this game, and it says, the ants were fearless, efficient killers. The unified underground's only opening was that the ant defense systems were designed by engineers too arrogant to consider the threat of an individual. It was enough to justify the covert abuse missions. On August 31st, 2021, 8 bytes were zeroed in a computer, and Nick Vrenna's identity was erased. A suit of armor cradling a smoking auto rifle stood in shadows, appreciating the stench coming from the first retired ant of the day. The armored soul feared the effort would end up as pathetic as the Terran surrender terms, but humanity had nothing else. I will say, I do love the way that they worded this and the whole. I wish that there was more of that in the game itself. That is, they write the plot parts really well, but it's really only at the very start and a little bit at the very end. But yeah. And let's see. And yeah, the mutants are very clearly modeled on the xenomorphs from the Alien movies. And honestly, I'd have to say this is by far one of the best and most entertaining games featuring them. It might be the one I enjoy playing the most. And apparently the thing that causes mutation is a specific gene. That's what's written in the opening crawl of the game, and that I'm not sure they understood how DNA works. Specific genes being contagious, but whatever, it's, let's see. And yeah, the battle armor, looks really cool, and offers at least some protection from outside dangers. And I guess that's also what means that there is no fall damage in this game at all. And yeah, I guess it's in Portal 2 they made the, or wait, did they do that in the first one? I forget, but you see the footwear kind of thing That's supposed to mean that you can fall further without taking so much damage. And yeah. Now, on plot. Again, straight from Wikipedia. Under history and development, Abuse had a very different storyline coming out of production. Yeah. The update for it replaced the original introduction with the current storyline. The original involved an invasion by an alien species called ants, and the player was a special ops agent sent to their hive to covertly destroy the aliens by shutting down the cooling system. So that really, I mean, in both you end up ending the threat, but it's very different. Destroying the cooling system means killing them, whereas diverting the water supply means that the rest of humanity aren't turned into the mutants. So yeah. And I do think, calling them ants does make sense from the appearance and behavior. And I love this game, but I will say the fact that the story changed so significantly and seemingly with relative ease does kind of show that it's very simple. I mean, you could easily write a completely third story, and just, if you ignored the opening crawl and pretended it was that third story, that would work fine as well. And this is from a 3.5 vote user review. Almost every single... I sprinkled the user reviews into the sections that make the most sense. And actually, now that I think about it, did I copy some of the critic? Most of these are user reviews. And yeah, actually, never mind. I'm not going to quote that. A lot of user reviews, several of them are very, either, they're kind of dismissive about the game in part because of the story, but this really isn't a game that's about the story, it's about the gameplay, and the gameplay is amazing. So I really don't know why these people were so dismissive, but yeah. I mean, but for me, this is easily an 8 out of 10. And let's see. I think I noted it somewhere, but I'm not sure exactly where. But so I don't remember the name, but yeah, I will. I have a lot of notes. I'm not certain how many of them I'm going to read, but I have a lot of notes from the aforementioned FAQ, and it's really excellent. This guy wrote it in, like, wait, did I say 93? Oh, crap. I think it's 96. I'm thinking of Jetpack, because I'm probably going to do more videos on that. Yeah, the game's from 96, not 93. Yeah, he actually wrote the FAQ in 96, and I guess uploaded it back then. I mean, the internet was around at the time, so yeah, and it's still up on GameFAQs, and I'm not sure it's been, like, updated or anything, and, as such, there are still a few things in there that, he says that the story still is what it was later changed from. But his quote is directly from the developers, if I understand correctly. But yeah, he does an excellent job of really outlining everything, and I don't think there's a single spoiler in there. So yeah, if you're into this game, yeah, definitely read that. At least look at parts of it, however much yeah. Now, I don't know why I noted it here, but I did note here. Occasionally, enemies and or items will get stuck in the floor, walls, or ceiling. When it happens with enemies, you can usually still kill them by using explosive weapons against them, but sometimes for one thing, there are parts of the game where you have to kill all the enemies. Part of me wishes that was completely consistent, but I guess that would have gotten tedious. Some of the later levels have an extreme amount of enemies, even in single areas. But there's also sometimes enemies, even if they're stuck, and literally, it's not like they've got glue. No, they literally move part way through, so much so that you can't hit them with non-explosive weapons anymore, and they might still be able to attack. So that's another reason you might. Now, length. This took me 5 hours and 21.5 minutes, and I mean, that is coming into it having played it at least twice before, and this is the only time where I noted how long it took me. But yeah, that is a lot of games from around this time were kind of short, and I do think that if it was much longer, it would just get to be too much of a grind. Ultimately, I don't know if it's that the level designers just didn't have enough ideas, or maybe they were too hooked on the ideas they had, which I'll get to. I think I put it in the level design section. But ultimately, as fun and as complex as the gameplay can be, ultimately it gets kind of stuck in a rut. I don't think the game is too long, but near the end, it does get to be. I would say that, yeah, if you maybe I'll say later in this video how many levels there are, because whenever you save, it tells you what level number you're in. And if I didn't know how long into it I was, I probably would have been really... I almost never stop playing a game unless I really legitimately feel certain that I cannot complete it. But I would have been frustrated to keep going. Oh, here we go. Features. I got a lot of information for this from the excellent FAQ on GameFAQs by Mike Perry. Now, back when it came out, I played the shareware version, which what we today call a demo, and I knew I needed to play the full version, so I got it and loved it. And I don't know why this is only my maybe third try. Yeah, honestly, it's probably because near the end it gets to be somewhat of a grind, where comparatively, Earthworm Jim I've played way more times, and that never does get to feel like just, the same thing over and over. And I'm not saying that this would ever have been as, varied of a game as that, but I do think that they, with all the elements at their disposal, they should have been able to keep coming up with more different ideas, and if nothing else, they should at least have put some of the clever ideas that are in the first chunk of levels in some of the later levels, because the later levels, they're almost just, yeah, I'll get to it. I'm sounding like Alfred Hitchcock in the Psycho trailer here. Sorry about that. That is an awesome trailer, though. He made really awesome trailers at a time where a lot of trailers, by today's standards, were pretty boring. And I say that as someone who loves trailers. Movie trailers. Yeah. Now, let's see. Yeah, this is from the FAQ. Beautiful shapes, point source lighting, and the engine, let's see. It has something called a built-in Lisp interpreter, which apparently means that you can add code into the game or create a whole new game which is instantly ported. Let's see. Too many platforms. Has lighting, sound, mouse joystick, network, high-res, and Windows support. And let's see. Yeah, and multiplayer IPX and TCP/IP. A friend of mine and I used to call it TCP/IP. Server client, start your game as a server and people can join in and leave later, automatically downloading the current level and state of the game. And let's see. There's a lot of technical stuff that I am not going to get into. Let's see. And yeah, Abuse was the first game to be released by the game company Crack.com. I'm not sure they made other games than this. I really wish they had. I absolutely love what they did here, and yeah. Now, excuse me. Gameplay. Now, again from the FAQ, Abuse is a 2D side-scrolling shoot-'em-up action puzzle game. Although the game borrows features from many genres of games, it best fits under the platform category, and I would have to agree. And let's see, Wikipedia, points out it's run and gun. And let's see. And the game is notable for its, at the time, unusual control scheme. The keyboard is used to move Nick, while the mouse is used for aiming the weapons. And yeah, that kind of undersells it, but I'll get more into why it's, yeah. And the basic gameplay consists of fighting various enemies, mostly the various forms of mutants who prefer to attack in huge swarms, and solving some simple puzzles, usually involving switches. And I will say I guess there's really only the one level, but some levels, there's at least one level where the puzzle is not very simple. It really, I kept doing, I mean, I didn't end up spending a lot of actual time on it, but I did various things that I thought would end up, wait, did I end up just lucking into the right solution? I think, yeah, there were several paths to take, and the one I took was the one that basically led to the flight power-up. And if I had not had the flight power-up, I would not have been able to complete later sections. And there's one later section where you literally fall down a hole and have to fly back up. It's possible that I wouldn't have been able to fall down that hole if I hadn't gone and gotten the flight power-up first, but it really seemed to me like they were just, yeah, but they almost never do that. And yes, now this is from a 3.5 review. He gave it, for gameplay, he gave it a 9 out of 10. Or he or she. This is a shooter platform style game, and you have lots of control of your character. You can actually control your character and his gun at the same time. And if you still play Robotron after all these years, you'll be used to it. I've never played that, but you know, if I could find a version that I could be fairly certain would work today. I mean, the reason I'm reviewing this is a game I still had. You know, this is not something I got recently, and obviously I'm not saying I don't know. Honestly, it's possible that you can still get this and get it working. You know, using DOSBox, I didn't have any problems getting it running, but I still had it from when I got it in '96. You know, so yeah, I don't know how, you know, but this is for people who, you know, who remember playing it, or who do also just happen to have lying around a copy that they can get working. But anyway, to get back to the review, but the learning curve takes some time if you're not. And honestly, I don't think I can really weigh in on that, because I've been so used to it for so long, so many years. You know, I mean, I sit down and I immediately remember how to play it. I find that it's very intuitive. And yeah, let's see. And other than that, you select your weapon of destruction and shoot, and pull some switches here and there. And let's see. And another review, let's see. He gives it an 8 out of 10. He says, "Loved this game, although it was short. The action was worth every minute of it." And I have to agree. You know, I mentioned it's certainly by today's standards, it's a short game, but I didn't feel like my money was wasted. Let's see. And let's see. Yes, and this is from a 4.5 review. The control scheme, you know, the keyboard is for controlling a character's movement, and the mouse, it controls a cursor on the screen that acts as the aimer for whatever weapon is currently in use. And yeah, this might not seem like much of a revolutionary design, but what this does is allow your character to aim in any direction while moving any direction as well, and it's done flawlessly. It really has to be used to be believed. And yeah, let's see. One of the major gripes I have with action platform games, they are my favorite ones though, is that you couldn't aim without it affecting the character's movement. But thanks to this brilliant control scheme, that problem is completely alleviated. And for my own notes, this combination is something I'm not sure I've seen in any other game. And aiming is one of the most important aspects of any game that requires aiming, and yet so many that aren't straight first-person shooter or third-person shooter mess it up. And it's, yeah, in this, you can and will be jumping around enemies, all while easily firing on them, going in any direction without ever taking your eyes or your weapon off the targets, but also knowing where you're going. I don't know any other game that lets you do that, and it is a huge tactical advantage. And oh, here, one reviewer says that the game has been made free by crack.com, so you can find it and download it no problem. And you know, that means that if I hadn't played it, if I hadn't paid for it back then, I would be able to get it today without spending any money. I hate spending money. I do it only when I absolutely have to. And this is an instance, you know, I paid full price. Which, yeah, I think I shouldn't have played the thing with I got it on sale. Yeah. Anyway, I paid full price. I'm glad I did. They deserve my money. And I hope that apparently, they're not making games. That company's not making games anymore. I hope that the individual people are still making games because they are incredibly talented. Every aspect of this has a lot of talent behind it. And from my own old written review, like many games in this period, it's a platform game, though the camera is dynamic and the screen moves along as you move, as seen, excuse me, in the Commander Keen games as well. And today I know, for this review, I noted that it will sometimes, for purposes of tension and atmosphere, slow down or move slightly ahead, placing you more to one side, closer to a corner, or the like. And I found that was really... If you told me that before I played it, I would probably have thought, oh, that's going to be so annoying. It works incredibly well. Yeah, I really love the way you see things in, yeah. And that is, of course, also, if you haven't played this before and you're sitting down to play it today, obviously the resolution and that kind of thing, you have to accept that it's gonna look, yeah, it has the resolution that it had back then, obviously. And if that's a deal breaker for you, I feel bad for you because you're missing out on a lot of really amazing games. But I'm not saying that for some people that's not a choice. That's just their eyes can't stand such. But that really sucks for you. Now, yeah, and instead of being a large stationary display showcasing an entire level, like it's the case with many games of this period, and I mean, let's see, off the top of my head, I'm almost certain Lode Runner and what's that game with where you control a wizard and you can remove a block in front of you, and that can be used to get rid of enemies because they fall in, and you could play co-op. Yeah, I don't remember what it's called, but yeah, those games. I forget if Lode Runner 2 did, but yeah, several games from this period, you see the entire level and you're moving around. Jetpack is another example. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It works well for those games, but this game, you would have lost so much if you were just a tiny speck on the screen moving around of an entire level seen all at the same time, Instead, you take up a chunk of the screen. And really, the entire screen will sometimes be full of just a swarm of enemies of different kinds. And that does something, that triggers this instinctive kind of I am being overrun, I have to get out of here kind of reaction. And it makes it so much more effective when when you're destroying and eliminating all these enemies violently. And this is something, every game I've played that has the xenomorph in it has some tries to make the xenomorph as scary as possible, an overwhelming, overpowering presence. And some of them get a lot of the way there, but none of them get close to the... I mean, I don't think the engine supports 100, but certainly several dozen enemies all at the same time without any slowdown or anything. Yeah, actually 100, not on screen all at the same time, but in one level at the same time, yes. And some of them are going to be in rooms where you know, left them behind. Yeah, I would definitely say at least 100 in total. Now, sometimes jumping is a little awkward and annoying. This can happen when you jump from standing or from running. Unfortunately, true of a lot of games, and at times this happens the same time as you running. Jumping, it gets slippery where you'll accidentally walk off where you were trying to jump from, or jump too soon or such, and this causes some jumping puzzles to get really frustrating, especially in the last several levels. And there's one part especially where what you're jumping between will disappear as you jump between them. And this is something that can be amazing when it works. You know, I love it in the Prince of Persia games, past the, you know, starting with Sands of Time, you know, that game, that trilogy as well, but that game, you know, I find that it's incredibly effective there because it is scary, the thing behind you disappearing as you're jumping from it. But here, yeah, because, you know, it took me a lot of tries. Thankfully, I could save right before doing it, but it took me maybe 10 tries or something to get it right. And that was a part where I seriously considered just saying, I can't complete the game this time. But, yeah. Power-ups. Now, power-ups always last until you pick up another one or complete the level, and sometimes you get to keep one, even the flight one, for a really long time in a single level. That's really cool. Now, yes, to quote from the FAQ, the fast power-up, this power-up looks like a giant ice... It has this emblazoned with a lightning bolt, and he says when you run over this power-up, you gain robotic legs. I'm fairly certain they're just the same legs you have all the time as the suit. The way I see it, you know, you're in this cybernetic suit, and it can be equipped with certain power-ups. I don't think that, you know, the legs are, you know, yeah, you can run faster because the cyborg legs that you know, hypothetically, if there was something, you know, yeah, if you put your legs into a suit of mechanical, and it would, you know, let you run much faster. You know, I mean, I don't know if it's completely realistic, but I think that is supposed to be the explanation. But yeah, you can run twice as fast as normal, jump higher, and climb ladders much more quickly than normal. And then there's the fly power-up, and yeah, it gives you the ability to fly. And you actually get to, the first time you get to use it is very early on. That's really cool. And basically, you just have to right-click to use one of these power-ups. You know, yeah, one of these two power-ups. Those are the ones you have to activate. And just the moment you let go of the right-click, you stop doing the thing. And flying, the flight is somewhat like Jetpack, actually, that game. You know, basically, and Alien vs. Predator 1 from 1999. The moment you let go, you start falling again, and, you know, unlike the AVP game, you don't have any, there's no fall damage. You can let yourself fall as far as you want, but it makes it very easy to determine whether you are rising or falling, and exactly how, and yeah, you have a ton of freedom of movement with it. And I really appreciate they managed to still make enemies really dangerous. Because some enemies are on the ceiling, and some enemies you'll have to fly close to. So it's not just, oh, now I can fly, now no enemies. No, it's still going to be, excuse me. And then there's the health power-up, which allows you to get 200 instead of 100 in health. And the moment that you pick it up, you get 200 in health. And as long as you have it, have that power-up, which is, again, for the rest of the level or until you pick up one of the other two, every time you pick up a heart, it, hearts, at least on the easiest difficulty setting, give you 20, a boost of 20, but usually that would stop at 100, now it stops at 200, which means, if you have 100, you just have to find 5 hearts to get to 200 again. And, trust me, you'll need the extra health. And I appreciate that it's not just, it doesn't only immediately give you 200. It actually lets you keep going back to 200 as long as you have it. And note that saving and then loading, at least on easy, resets your health to 100, because it always resets your health to 100 if you have lower, and it also does it if you have more. So yeah, there were times where I was like, I really want to be able to, part of me really wants to load here, but I also don't want to, lose all this health that, yeah. Okay, this, oh, that's right, yeah, there are power-ups listed here in the FAQ that I didn't find anywhere in the game. There's a sneaky power-up which allows you to become partially invisible. I know there are enemies that can do that, but I never saw it. I could totally see how it's useful. There are a lot of enemies that you would like to be able to sneak past. And one called a visor power-up. I swear that I caught mention of this somewhere. I would guess that it turns off lighting effects or provides the user with a high beam headlight. And then he says, it is available only in the commercial version of Abuse, if at all. And yeah, I certainly didn't find it anywhere. And let's see. That takes us to weapons. And a lot of this is going to be from the FAQ. I figured there's really no reason for me to write all this down when he did such a great job of it. So yeah. You have the laser rifle, which is the most basic weapon in the game. It shoots red laser pulses on Star Wars in the direction in which you point the rifle. And you can use the laser rifle even without the proper ammunition, because if you couldn't shoot, as JC puts it, that would suck. I think JC is one of the developers. Having ammunition for the laser rifle is still a crucial item to have, as a loaded laser rifle fires considerably faster than an unloaded laser rifle. The laser rifle does not care whether the rifle ammo count is 1 or 1000, it will still fire at the same rate. And you have a grenade launcher. This weapon launches grenades in a realistic parabolic arc. Realistic, that is, if you know the fact that the game world would have to be vacuum in order for the trajectory of the grenade to be that perfect. It would probably be too busy watching the pretty explosions and like your opponents with massive damage to notice anyway. Guided missile launcher, and yeah, it's the the highly maneuverable missiles that this weapon launches will follow your opponents to the ends of the earth. And when enemies fire them at you, you can sometimes shoot the missile before it hits you, either with a projectile like the laser, or if you cause an explosion and the missile is within that explosion. But that does also mean that you know, if there are a lot of missiles firing at you, it's still a real threat, and you do still have to be careful to hit it, and maybe there are missiles coming from 3 different parts of the screen, making it very difficult to cause enough explosions, but yeah. And I think enemy explosions can cause this as well, and enemy explosions can also destroy turrets. And I think they can also kill enemies, I'm not 100% certain. And if you kill the mutant or turret that fired the missile, it will stop seeking. It will in fact only explode when it hits a wall, the ceiling, or the floor. So don't be near those when it explodes. Literally, it will move right past you if you're just in, yeah. And you can tell what path it'll take once it isn't seeking anymore, just straight in whatever angle it was going. So yeah. And yeah, this one's apparently called the Fireball Rifle. You might have a hard time distinguishing this weapon from a flamethrower. However, this weapon is projectile-based and produces a trail of flaming particles that follow each other like the cars of a train. And since the weapon is particle-based, the projectiles are affected by gravity. You do not have to fire straight at an opponent in order to hit them. I have to say, the enemies that have the flame were easily the ones I had the most trouble with, because it is so difficult to be far enough away from them not to be hit by that, and you can't actually do something once they fire it, which is, again, you know, if they fire anything explosive at you, you can maybe blow that up before, yeah, but the flame just, and once there are several enemies that fire the flame, yeah. And then there's a plasma gun. It produces a burst of plasma that looks more like the maximum energy burst than you shoot. I don't know. This weapon is available, and yeah. And you change weapons back and forth on insert and control, and this is one of the places where, you know, it would be nice if you could change those keys, because that is kind of awkward, but you know, it works. It could be a lot worse. I've played games from the 90s that had a lot worse controls. And some of these weapons, you will be able to gather up hundreds of extra shots. The limit is 999, and I know this because I hit that limit for one immensely powerful weapon, and that's also, you know, that's the cue to someone like me who tries to save up everything I can to, this is the time, you know, you can go ahead and use it, because you're not going to be able to gather more ammo for it before you've spent it. And yeah, I really appreciate that they set the limit that high, because that weapon comes in extremely handy. AI/enemies. And again, from the FAQ. Now, let's see. The mutant is the enemy that you will meet most frequently, much more deadly than the insect variety. These ants will really spoil your picnic. Straight up alien, these creatures will gnash, claw, and shoot their way to a chance to dine on your tender flesh. Ants are somewhat intelligent predators in that they will use their ability to walk on ceilings in order to avoid your attempts to destroy them. Beware, ants often travel in packs. There are 7 varieties of ants in the commercial release of Abuse and 4 varieties in the shareware release. Each type of ant is a different color and fires one of the 7 or 4 weapons provided in the game, and there's a variant of them regardless of which weapon they have that's see-through, nearly invisible, and near the end some of them are carried by flying robots in egg form, meaning that each robot destroyed means a mutant. And yeah, that particular section, the enemies were incredibly those were incredibly powerful mutants. And I should also say, near the end, they introduce a few new enemies, but they just look a little different from the other ones. They behave basically the same way, and I feel like they should maybe have, yeah, I don't know, I feel like there's not that much. After a while of playing the game, you're kind of used to the different enemies there are. That doesn't mean that they're not still scary, but you do, yeah, you know, before you've completed the game, you will have seen every enemy so many times that, yeah. Back to the FAQ. Juggernauts. These giant robots have in their possession an unlimited number of grenades, and they aren't exactly conservative with their supply. Some models of this robot are immobile, while later models will walk towards your character in order to get a better shot. Juggernauts are quite tough and can take a lot of direct hits before they shatter to pieces, but unfortunately you usually aren't given a choice to run away. And flyers. These agile robots have the ability to flight. Flyers never stand still, so they are often difficult to target. However, a steady stream of laser pulses or guided missiles usually do the trick. And from my own notes, mutants will crawl on the ceiling, not the walls, and they will leap between the ceiling and the floor. They'll come right at you, they'll run past you, then back past you as they attack all the while, etc. And that's a really smart way to do a lot of games with enemies like this. The enemy will run to where it can reach you, and then if you don't move, it'll basically park itself there and just attack from there. And that's just not as scary. And here, the fact that they'll run back, I mean, sometimes they will basically park, but I'd say most of the time in this, the enemies will keep moving even if you're standing still. They just, that's part of the programming. They don't like to stand still, and that makes them scarier and more efficient because it makes them harder to target, even with really powerful weapons and fast weapons. I'd have to say this is one of the best games AI-wise of all games featuring the Xenomorph, and I realize that's not saying much, but it really is great. And other enemies than the mutants will fly around you, and at times you're the one flying around them. You know, maybe both of you are flying around each other, and the robots will slowly but surely walk towards you with the determination and armor of a robot out of a Terminator movie, one of the good ones, 1, 2, or Genesis. And every time you walk down a tiny, tight, claustrophobic corridor and it turns out to be a blind path, you know you have to walk back and that you will be attacked, very likely, as you walk back. And sometimes they'll even do that thing where you can see where the enemy is, but it's inactive, and you can't shoot an inactive. You can't do damage to an inactive enemy. It'll show that you're hitting it, but you won't do any damage. Trust me, I've stood for minutes on end just shooting. They never, and the moment they're triggered, they still have the same amount of health that they would have if you hadn't shot them. So, just, yeah. And, yeah, you'll walk past a bunch and be like, I'm gonna have to fight those when and, yep, you reach and maybe there's like a switch for you to throw. You throw it, and immediately you hear the sounds of the mutants, and you start moving back, and the moment that, you may not even see them jump out, just you'll be attacked, and you know that those are the enemies that you passed before, or, yeah. And some enemies can be attacked from a safe spot out of their range, and many enemies can be stun-locked, which is good because they have heavy weapons, and yeah, if stun-locking wasn't a part of this game, I don't think you could complete it in its current form. And this actually means that being close to some enemies is safer than keeping them at a distance, since you hit them faster than if they're further away. And this is especially true when using the laser weapon to save precious ammo of other guns. And further, if you are in a corridor, it's even safer sometimes. excuse me, and it just so happens that that exact setting and situation is also one of the scariest, and not only in this game, instinctively too. So yeah, they did a great job on that. There's so many games that try really hard for the enemies to be effective and scary and memorable, and this is one of the ones that really succeeds. Environmental elements. And again from the FAQ, bombs. Bombs are explosive devices which can kill a player if they are within the blast radius. Boulders are gigantic spiked metal spheres. They are affected by gravity and will fall if in the air, and when they hit the ground they will bounce. A boulder will cause damage to a player when it collides with them, and they can also damage aliens and other objects that can be hurt. And when it's dealt enough damage, it will break up into smaller boulders, which will then explode on contact with the floor. And boulders are simultaneously one of the most threatening to you and useful against mutants, because it really does a ton of damage. And yeah, I mean, again, it's a primal fear, being crushed by something giant from above, you know, and it does. It stun locks you, and it stun locks enemies. So yeah, it legitimately, and you know, sometimes you can blow it up with relative ease, but it's, yeah. And let's see. Concussion mines. These small mines will cause damage to the player upon impact. They can be found in the air as well as on the ground. Sometimes they even move. And some areas have a series of them all moving in a pattern. Yeah. Force fields. Force fields are walls of energy which prevent the user from moving through them. Force fields may be as high as one screen. And the thing is, they don't block your, you know, your shots from weapons, but they also don't block, at least flying robots. I'm not entirely sure if they block like mutants and such, but they don't block the flying robots. So that can cause you problems. Lava. Lava tiles will do constant damage to a player while they're in contact with the lava. Sometimes you get the speed power up and you have to run across a ton of lava, and sometimes there are mutants in there with you, and yeah. Shock pulses. These objects intermittently shoot out pulses of electricity which deal a healthy amount of damage to the player. Not all of them are static, some of them move horizontally, which, yeah, and you have to time it right. Watch it carefully for the brief opening, similar to turning off bombs in Abe's Odyssey. And yes, I do now have the, you know, that was released for free recently. I'm not sure I'm going to play it, because that is a game where, you know, if you complete a couple of puzzles and then you fail on one, you might have to complete several puzzles again, and that can get really tedious. Yeah, I enjoyed playing the demo when it first came out. I don't, you know, as a thing made clear, I don't mind that the graphics are a little, and I could get used to the controls. That's not a problem. You know, that is also a thing with this. It's not WASD. It's the keys, the arrow keys, and that is also going to throw people off. And spray guns. They're turret-like guns which will rotate in a left fashion, shooting out sprays of shots. Spray guns may fire any type of weapon, and yeah, I'll get more into. And tunnel robots. This large robot can chase a player down a hole, forcing the player to either destroy it or die a horrible death within the robot's spinning blades. And that's, again, you know, yeah, something just keeps coming at you and it'll crush you against a wall. Yeah, another instinctive fear. And track guns. Track guns are similar to spray guns, except that The track guns will track the motion of a player, and yeah. And trapdoors on the floor can be activated by sensors and switches. Watch where you choose to take a breath when playing net abuse. Yeah. Doors abuse contains both switch-activated and sensor-activated doors, and springs that provide a player with an upward boost when the player comes into contact with one. I really when the sorry, just spotted a bird taking off very suddenly. Well, perhaps it's been contemplating doing so for minutes and I just didn't see. The springs, if you jump properly from below it into a spring, it will launch you far into the air. But if you just land on it from above, it barely, sends you into the air. And I get that that's supposed to make these jumping puzzles harder, and it works. I just wish that if you didn't jump into it and it didn't give you the big leap, you just passed right through it instead, because it's super annoying to fail. There's this one part where, let's see, yeah, you're here, you have to jump into one that's here, then one that's here, and then one that's here, and it's incredibly difficult to do. And then once you've gotten the last one, then back to the other side again, and yeah, probably 5 or 10 times before it finally worked for me. And every single time I missed by even a little, immediately you fall into one of them, and then you're just bouncing a little bit into the air, and it's just like, okay, I get it. I'm the same way when there's like a several seconds long game over or you died screen. It's like, I get it. I know what just happened. It's not like if you removed that, I would be sitting, what just happened? No, I get it. Let's move on. I want to try again so that I can get past this, And yeah, that's just really annoying. I don't blame them for making it that you do have to make the proper. And actually, yeah, afterwards, I realized all I got was some ammo. It wasn't for puzzle or anything. Yeah. And let's see. Switches. These state-changing devices will hopefully activate something beneficial to your player, like a trapdoor with more ammo. If you aren't so lucky, you might unleash a pack of mutants. And abuse contains both select-activated switches and shot-activated switches. And platforms move, they can lift, move you to different floors and sections of the level. And some of them, a lot of them move, yeah, some of them move horizontally, some of them vertically. And pushers, objects that will give your player a push in the direction of the arrows of the pusher, and they have varying strengths, so it may or may not be a futile attempt to avoid going with the flow. See, there are a couple of places where they use those really well, and then they kind of just disappear from the rest of the game, and I really feel like they could have made some cool puzzles later in the game by using some of these elements that ultimately just go by the wayside. And yeah, just it would have been really cool to keep. Honestly, either they refused to kill their darlings, or maybe just they, I don't know, ran out of time or something, because it really, the first bunch of levels, maybe they suddenly found that they had to make a bunch more levels. They expected to make maybe half as many levels as there are of the game, and then once they'd completed all of those, they, someone told them, you have to make more levels, you have to make the game longer or something, and that's why the rest of the levels, yeah, it really sucks. It's too bad when games, when after a while of a game, you just realize suddenly this is not, I'm going to be reviewing Judge Dredd, Dredd vs. Death, and the last time I played it, I realized this is two different games. This is a game of two halves, and the halves don't necessarily mesh that well. And it's not, neither half is a bad game. It's just a little weird. That's, yeah, a while into the game, certain thing happens, and then for the rest of the game, it's just a different game altogether, and it's almost where you kind of wish that they would, like, properly separate. I'm not saying, you know, make you pay for both halves separately or something, but just divide it into episodes or something, like the old Commander Keen games. You know, you have the 6 main games, and then you have Keen Dreams. All of them have some distinct differences from each other, and yeah, you know, if you played one and then it just immediately led into another without you having to boot up the different game and, you know, being able to read a different story section and such, it would feel kind of weird. And it is. I mean, if Dread versus Death, if the game was only either of those halves, it would feel too short and inconsequential. Yeah, anyway, let's see. Now, from my own old review, the game has no actual blood. Anything you destroy basically falls apart in body parts in the case of living, or should I say dead, beings and explosions, and metallic dust in the case of robotic ones. And yeah, and there are a lot of robots, and they're actually somewhat neutral. While you're technically still considered a threat by them, so are your transformed enemies. And a bunch of times you can actually utilize the strong defense network in the pen to help dispatch of the mutated beings. And this is something I don't know how they would have explained back when it was. I guess if it was that they were outer space beings and you were in their ship or vessel of some kind, I guess it's that it's their defense system and you're using it against them. But that doesn't make sense, because a lot of the time they just run mindlessly into the, you know, it makes a lot more sense if it's a prison and these are just the defenses that are still there, and the mutants just don't really, I mean, they have a certain level of intelligence, but they're not, you know, yeah, there are some things that they clearly can't completely grasp. They can't see a turret and realize I should not get into the line of fire of that thing, you know. But yeah, and that's again something, there are way too few games that let you do this kind of thing, where you can set up traps for enemies, and in fact, where, you know, there are a couple of games where you can set up traps. You know, the Home Alone game, which I maintain, you know, great game, and the, you know, Commandos 2, at least. I think Commandos 3 also, but I forget. But in those two games, I mean, in Home Alone, you can ruin a trap. If you run into a trap, you can accidentally ruin it, so it won't work on Harry or Marv. But and you know, in Commandos 2, you can't trigger them at all yourself, except, you know, the explosives. Obviously, you can trigger with explosions. In this, the turrets are as dangerous to you as they are to the enemy, basically, because what the turrets fire can hit you just as well as it can hit them. And again, some of them will specifically target you. You know, some will specifically target you, not target the enemies. Some will specifically target the enemies, not you. You know, and the spray ones, yeah. If you stay out, if you can stay out of their, you know, range, yeah, then you're safe. But if you do walk into it, yeah, you're going to let's see. Yeah, you know, you're going to take damage as well. But yeah, and that's a thing where I feel, again, they could have used that better in some of the later levels. That they do use it, but it could have been used better. And I forget if I ever did get, I think me and a friend of mine did play this a little bit in multiplayer, but I don't remember. I think that some of the multiplayer levels have these guns, which again, they can only be destroyed when they are firing. They can't be destroyed otherwise. And one player could turn on the thing and it would hit the other player and thus lure enemies into traps, which is again something I love in multiplayer levels. You know, there are several traps in multiplayer levels of Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, and yeah. And I want to say some Unreal Tournament games, maybe, and yeah, just absolutely love it. And for some reason, you get a gun in this game just by picking up ammo for that gun. You never pick up a weapon as such. But I guess the idea is that the suit already has the guns and you're just picking up ammo for them. But by that logic, why doesn't it just display empty ammo counters for all of them at the start? Maybe the idea is that there's some kind of nanotechnology that instantly forms the weapon when you pick up ammo, but instantly, we are talking the moment you pick up ammo, you can use the gun, which makes that explanation kind of hard to realistically, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can imagine they just did it so that they wouldn't have to design specific power-up weapons. And certainly for something like multiplayer, again, it's really nice that you just pick up ammo and not have to look for the gun itself. And let's see. Yeah, and I will say the creators went quite a bit overboard with the easily demolished walls, introduced early as weak walls, but later found disguised as regular ones. A lot of walls that look weak actually aren't, and it's not really a problem. It's just something to be aware of. Anyway, in the later levels, they really went overboard. Now, and the turrets can be on the ceiling floor or the wall, not the background wall, but the, yeah, you know, the wall to your left or right, but not behind you as such. And let's see, brings us graphics. And again from the FAQ, scenery and graphics. The foreground scenery is made up of the floor, ceiling, wall textures, and other graphic components that your character interacts with. The foreground is created using combinations of tiles that you choose from a foreground palette. When you place an object on the screen, it is placed in the foreground as well, although it can be moved and manipulated as a separate entity. And Abuse comes with a large palette of predefined foreground tiles that include floor tiles, walls, ceilings, ramps, camera textures, force textures, ladders, pipes, and more. And the game engine allows for 2 levels of parallax scrolling. And using the background palette, one can make a background which can be set to scroll at a defined rate in order to add the feeling of depth to the level, and that works really nicely. And this is from Wikipedia. Active zone. To improve the performance of Abuse's graphics engine, the code only allows objects within a certain radius of the visible game window to be active during play. This means that free-roaming enemies and always-on mechanical devices outside the radius cannot attack the player, nor will projectiles fired from outside the radius, fired from weapons that ostensibly have an infinite range, continue their journey much beyond the edge of the screen. This makes the enemies even scarier. Again, do note, they're still gonna be moving. They don't stop moving once they're off screen, but they can't attack you and you can't attack them. But yeah, this makes the enemies even scarier. You don't know them until they're much closer, since they don't attack from off screen. And no matter what you do, the enemies could always be just slightly off screen. So closer because of this. Again, the camera is relatively tight on you, and the mutants can close the distance in almost no time, like a fraction of a second. Excuse me. You can go from not seeing or even hearing a single enemy to the screen being swarmed with them. And this again makes it that much scarier and makes it that much better that you can, you know, that you can very quickly fire a lot of projectiles at different, you know, parts of the group. With, you know, the game would have been impossible if that were the case and you couldn't aim independently of moving your character with the keys. And yeah, this is yet another case where a necessary decision and a creative effort led to a positive outcome. Excuse me. Now, others also say it has amazing graphics. The game itself is an experience definitely worth playing. And he gave it graphics 9 out of 10. This is some of the best 2D graphics of its time. Light ambience is featured in your character while Spirit does its job fine. The game area appears drab, but it certainly fits within the theme of the game. And that's, yeah, and that's another thing where, you know, a game like the original Prince of Persia, you know, I want to say his name is Jordan Mechner, he knew we're not gonna, yeah, I think actually he made it by himself, I'm not sure he, yeah, you know, okay, I'm not going to be able to make, like, a sprawling cityscape or something. So I'm going to set my game entirely within a dungeon, where the fact that everything is gray and black is, you know, it just fits. And as such, you know, and then there's of course the parts that have this more golden quality. But yeah, you know, by and large, you're always stuck within this small enclosed area, and the limited color palette works in favor of the game, you know, and you could add more color to that game, but it would just start to take away from the experience. And the graphics are rendered sprites. This one 4.5 review does point out that aliens have some choppy animation, and yeah, that is true. And yeah, the graphics, from my own old review, the graphics are fairly simple, but they're very nice for the dark cyberpunk-ish mood of the game. And audio. And this is from a 3.5, I think, out of a total of 5 review. Sound, 10 out of 10. Some excellent sound work here as well. There's an echo sound effect played throughout the game, draws you in. Grunts and groans alert you to the presence of aliens, and you can feel their pain as you fry them with missiles and flamethrowers. and off-screen and on-screen mutants will screech, howl, squeal, snarl, etc. It's, yeah, incredibly effective, horrifying, yeah. Is it challenging? And again, from the 3.5 review, as I said, it's an experience you ought to try it for yourself. And from my own overview, the frequent saving, there are stations where you can save, and they are found on most levels, and you can often return to them several times, removes most possibility for frustration from the game, though some is still left due to the monstrous difficulty found in a few portions of the game. The difficulty, apart from that, is well-rounded. For different settings, nearly everyone should be able to play it, and most will enjoy the challenge that even the easiest of them offers. And yeah, honestly, the difficulty, I might have already said that, but yeah, that's probably the reason I haven't played it. Yeah, that and the fact that near the end it gets tedious, but probably more the few really frustrating parts that, yeah. And yeah, you can save at the very start of any level, although there are a few levels where you literally do have to walk for maybe 10 seconds before you reach a save spot. But in those 10 seconds, you will probably not be attacked. There isn't a single level where I mean, I based this on the easiest difficulty setting. I can't even imagine completing it on a higher difficulty setting than that. But I mean, certainly some parts of the game I can, but not the game as a whole. But yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, there isn't a single level where I died between completing the level before it and being able to save at the start of a new one. The game doesn't save automatically at the start of a level, but you do get these save stations. And yeah, on the easiest difficulty setting, if you save without full health, which is the case many times, loading refills your health rather than leaving you with what you had left. And this really, honestly, there are a lot of parts of the game that I don't think I would be able to complete if this wasn't the case. And I don't know if it was intentional or, like, you know, I can understand if they at least wanted you to, I mean, you can save and then immediately load your game and then immediately have full health, or 100 health, even if you had more. Too, but you know, I could understand if they were like, you have to play on until you know, until you die naturally, but yeah. And you can change difficulty anytime during play, not only at the start. And before I say the following, I do want to reiterate, I love playing this game, and I don't regret playing it through. You know, honestly, if I had played through and I wasn't doing this video, I might be a little disappointed, but and I couldn't tell you right now if I'm gonna play it again. But yeah, with that said, the climax is infinitely easier to get past than about half the levels leading up to it. Honestly, the very last level, and it is short in general, but it's supposed to have this really epic fight. It took me a minute to complete. I completed it on the second try. You know, I just loaded it. If the first time I loaded up the very toughest gun, the most, yeah, and then that didn't work so well, so I used the gun with the 999 ammo for it, and just immediately, with ease, completed. It's, yeah, I have to wonder if they designed the climax early and then not change it so that it would be tougher than those. And again, maybe it was supposed to be that it came much earlier. In that case, I completely understand. I would say it's good enough if it had come maybe halfway through the game. And yeah, and it's also one of those final enemy things that aren't really explained by the setup, and it very easily could have been. Honestly, the whole ending, albeit it does close out the story, does deflate. You know, it's excuse me. I mean, I would say that, you know, Alien vs. Predator 1 and 2 are good examples of games where you know the basic, you know, the yeah, because of the core concept, when you reach the final level and the big fight there, it's been set up, you understand where it comes from, and thus it feels more natural and it has more of an impact. And level design. And for my own old review, the level design, while at times somewhat repetitive and linear, is great. Dark, dreary, seemingly endless tunnels, security areas, and the likes. There are even areas that appear to be rainforest, which I guess is due to the abused creatures. And some user reviews say this is 2D Doom. It's hardly just Doom. Again, I respect that game, although I'll admit, I played Doom 1 and 2 when they were new. They never really made an impact, but I was not part of the whole, you know, they spoke to some people, and I'm glad. And there certainly are some really compelling aspects to those first two games. But I was not one of those people who, in the 90s, were just like, yeah, bring down the, you know, the system and listen to heavy metal and, you know, shoot creatures that are like, you know, that make you think of like devil and yeah, kind of stuff. So and just, I'm sorry, Wolfenstein 3D spoke to me so much more, and that again is a game that they knew, okay, we're not going to be able to make, we can't make the sky look good, so let's set the entire game inside of a bunker where you not being able to see very, you know, everything looks gray and dark, and all the whole, you know, a lot of areas look the exact same, and that adds to the atmosphere. It doesn't make the game feel, I mean, you could say that it's in some ways, certainly certain levels are very minimalistic, but the fact that it's soul crushing, and intentionally so, and it also makes you wonder if you're going in the right direction at all, because you don't feel like nothing, everything keeps looking the same. I move minute after minute and everything looks the same, and then you're going around trying to find, you know, hidden paths and just activating everything, you know, just, yeah. Excuse me. And Duke Nukem 3D also spoke to me way more, so it's not that I didn't get into 90s violent first-person shooters, you know, but just Doom was not. Part of it is that so much of the game is just, why are some of them enemies pink and some of them like regular red and blue? How is that supposed to be scary? I realize that some of the sound work make them scarier, but I find it extremely difficult to find them scary when they're just regular colors. Like, I mean, I could stop playing the game and I could draw like a pretty blue sky and I'd be using the same blue yeah, so it just, and again, I don't think that had to be the case, because I found the Nazis look far more compelling. That I find Doom and Doom 2 is just, they're among those games that just they overreach. They tried, they thought that they could make it you know, and that's another, you know, the sky in those games, although chunks of those games certainly do know to stay inside, but when you see sky, it just looks silly. You know, it doesn't look like, and you know, some later games have gone there and it worked. And I do appreciate sometimes you need games that, and movies that go further than they actually, so, you know, they go beyond what they can make look good or sound good or that kind of thing. I don't think, at the end of the day, what ages better is something that didn't go beyond what it could. And yeah, I'd say this is one of those that, anyway, to get back to it, what this does that Doom doesn't is, it has such terrifying traps. I don't remember there being traps in Doom. I mean, yeah, it's like you open a door and behind that door there's some, and sometimes you open a door and the enemy comes up behind you. But in this, they're so frequent, and Doom doesn't have constantly have enemies appearing seemingly out of nowhere. The Doom doesn't destroy the very floor beneath you and such. Excuse me. You never feel safe in this, and in Doom 1 and 2, you feel safe once you have certain weapons, and at that point, it's not scary, it's just cool. And I get why you'd want that, but then why am I shooting, creatures that, that are supposed to make me think of, like, excuse me, Satan and his minions and such, if it's cool, if I'm feeling cool during it. I have kind of the same issue with some of the zombie games that, in a lot of ways I like Left 4 Dead 1 better than Left 4 Dead 2. And the what's it called? Yeah, that one that I also reviewed, that's a lot like Left 4 Dead. I forget what it's called right now. It's been a while since I played it. But yeah, in this you have these tight, narrow corridors and drops where you don't know what you'll land on. Very different from Doom. There are places in Doom where you fall really far. I don't remember a single one of them being a safe landing, so it's just, oh, I'm falling, guess I'll have to load the game and try this part over again. Where in this, it's like, I'm falling, am I going to land in lava? Is there going to be a swarm of enemies down there? All these different things, and just, yeah. But yeah, near the end, the levels are too full of traps, with a floor or wall exploding every few seconds for some sections, leading to almost half a minute of constant changes of the status quo. The level designers did not kill their darlings, and the game will start to feel like a grind maybe halfway through. If you play this in a single sitting, I played 1 or 2 levels per day, over, yeah, I guess, like, yeah, over 2 weeks, so it only, yeah, that doesn't tell you exactly how many there are anyway. So it only set in the last levels. I do try to, I feel like it is kind of a spoiler to tell people how many levels are in a game, where the game length, that's something that's gonna really make you consider how, if you wanna play it or not, buy it or not. But yeah, the status quo is simply at that point so fragile that nothing feels like it has any consequences. Even if there isn't constantly a wall blowing up or enemies appearing in enormous numbers out of nowhere, there almost might as well be. Status quo in flux has become the new status quo, and then there's nothing you can do that is gonna shock the player, really. But the atmosphere grips you from the opening moments, the audio, the dreary physical setting, the way it feels endless, hopelessly enormous, and you are nothing compared to its vastness, easily one of the thickest atmospheres of any game I've ever played. And occasionally the game will tease you with how close the exit is. You may fall past it, not yet having flight, or you may see it, but a swarm of enemies keep you from reaching it. Now, let's see. Yeah, before I make any... Yeah, I think I'm just going to go ahead and... Yeah. Let's see. Thoughts. Please note that this video has spoilers for the subject. And yeah, really, I'm not sure I'm gonna say anything in this part other than there are a total of 21 levels. And for some reason, when you save in the final level, it's labeled level 18. But there's very little time. Actually, I guess I could give that away in this. 1 second. There we go. And that was actually something I have this installed on 2 of my drives on the computer. So I loaded it up and saw, okay, the last level is level 18. And then when I got to level 18 in this playthrough, I was like, this isn't what I know what the last level looks like, and this isn't, so I completed it, and then, yeah. But technically, the last level is technically level 21 because it comes after level 20. But yeah, that tells you how long as you play through this, whenever you save, and you can see what level you're in, and you'll have an idea of how close you are to the end. But the levels, a lot of them are, their length is very different from each other, But yeah, let's see. Yeah, when I had completed the actual level 18, it only took me 11 minutes and 10 seconds to get level 21, and 20 minutes and 10 seconds from completing level 17. So, and I don't really have any I did take level notes, but yeah, they're not necessarily that specific or interesting. I guess I could just briefly go over. Yeah, and technically the first level is level 0. The tutorial level is level 0. When you complete that level and then play the next one, that one is called level 1 when you save. But yeah, so tutorial level took me 6 minutes and 49 seconds. Level 1, 7 minutes. Level 2, 14 minutes and 23 seconds. 3 was 21 minutes and 6 seconds. 4 was 21 and 34 seconds. 5 was 21:49. 6 was 25:31. 7 was 16:50. 8 was 14:31. But then 9 was only 8 minutes and 17 seconds. 10 was 23:41 seconds. 11 was 14 and 31 seconds. 12 was 15. 13 was 11:51. 14 was 12:08. 15 was 41 and 52. And actually, yeah, and some of that was because I could not figure out what, it seemed that was the one with the trick jumping between the turrets that blow each other up. And for a while I figured this can't be the way to get through. I figured that there must be flight somewhere that I had, and yeah, I kept going through more of the level, and it just didn't, yeah, turned out it had to be that. And again, 5 to 10 tries. And if I hadn't completed the game before, I played games very differently when I first got this. I was much more competitive. And today, if I didn't know that I had completed before, I probably would have said, I can't complete this, plain and simple. Now, let's see, level 16 was 18 minutes and 21 seconds, 17 was 6 minutes 40, 18 was 9 minutes, 19 was 7 minutes 27 seconds, level 20 was only 4 minutes and 43 seconds, and level 21, 1 minute and 33 seconds, and that's including, first I easily defeat the boss, and then I run past some mines that takes maybe 5 seconds or something, and then I turn off, turn on the switch, and I see the water thing moving. So, and then the end text comes, and it just says, you did it, congratulations, and then it says you're howling, and I'm like, does that mean I turn into a mutant? Because I was told at the start of the game that I was immune, and yeah, now the climax, I guess you could call it a boss fight, is basically this. I don't know if it's more than one, if it's the same one that just teleports around or what, but you fight, I don't know, maybe a dozen total, ultimately, forms of this. There's like, it's kind of like one of those things where, you have, this is first place, this is second, this is third, and all three of those places there can be, one of the mutants, but it's bigger than usual, and it'll kind of morph between some of the different ones and fire different ones. And really the only one that seemed to be any threat to me was as usual, the flame rifle one. The others, I kept shooting it with the 999 gun, and that was it. It very easily got past it, and then I run, and if the game had set up that, excuse me, and another game is System Shock 2, beautifully sets up what is this overall, and when you get to the climax, when you have to defeat a certain enemy at the end, you understand what it is. And in this, it's just, oh, now they're bigger. I played an arcade game where you actually get to hold a pulse rifle, literally. The controller is a pulse rifle, which is really cool. And yeah, you get to fire the grenades and everything. And one of the bosses was, I think they called it a super face hugger, and yeah, it was just a bigger face hugger. And it's like, what's even the point? Why would it be bigger? What is it trying to face hug? And then, and it jumps at you, if I recall, and you take damage, but it isn't face hugging. It's not, implanting you like the others are. So yeah, it's just, and it's difficult. It's especially difficult with the Alien franchise. It's, but yeah, I've discussed that in videos on the Alien franchise. But yeah, it's too bad, because I really feel like they could have just had the opening crawl explain, some of them change size or something, and then early on, maybe some of them are really small, and you're like, maybe some of them are really big, and then you get to the end, yeah, there's one that's really big or something. And it's also just, is it teleporting? I guess maybe it's the same one that keeps teleporting, and it has more health than the other one, so I have to keep shooting it for a really long time, so something like that. But it's just, yeah, it didn't need to be. They could easily have set up, and yeah, the ending there, had some kind of thing of like, you appear to be immune, or yeah, some kind of thing where, like, if you keep taking a lot of, I was gonna say, if you keep taking a lot of damage and you're still alive, then you may get infected. But then, if you have 200 health and you just barely survive, then you should be infected there. So it's, yeah, but just some kind of, like, yeah, if you want the ending twist to be that he does turn, maybe have it be that, he flips the switch, and then, like, the floor, unexpectedly, the floor, that's another thing, is the floor exploding. Is that just because it's like, it's a prison and it's really old, or is that supposed to happen? Because when you flip a switch and then defenses come on, that makes sense. But anyway, yeah, unexpectedly, the floor collapses beneath you, and you just see him start to fall, and it fades out, and then in fades this still image of him, like, in the water supply, like, struggling to get out or something, and, like, maybe, yeah, and then he, like, falls under and fade, and you come out as a mutant or something. You know, if that's the ending you want to make. But as it is, it just doesn't really make sense. Why howling? What? Yeah, just and yeah. With all that said, I love the game, and the only thing, the only reason I can think of that I haven't played it way more times is that after a while it does get tedious. Yeah, I probably used to do it in fewer sittings, and that way I can definitely imagine it getting tedious. You know, so yeah, that's one thing, and another thing is that there are these few places that just so frustrating, and it's yeah, and I don't think they had to be. I feel like they could have worked them over some more and just figured, you know, to make it easier in those spots. Honestly, the one where you're jumping between exploding turrets, you know, the thing I did the first many times, and then obviously I couldn't complete the level without loading first, was just go and destroy all of them. And I feel like that should have been the solution, that, you know, you destroy all of them, and then once that's done, you know, yeah, like a wall explodes or something, and then you get up via elevator or one of the springs or something, you know, but not just, yeah. If they wanted you to be attacked while jumping up there, just make a few platforms that it was always the middle one. It was always when I jump to the middle one and then I try to jump further, the middle one gets blown up because the moment I'm in the middle, there are so many attacking me from all sides. And you know, there are parts where I have to jump between platforms somewhat like that, but it doesn't, yeah. But yeah, on a whole, definitely stand by what I gave it, you know, I don't know, 10 years ago or more, something, you know, when I reviewed it in text, definitely an 8 out of 10, and I'm really glad it exists. I wish there were more games like it, and I really hope that the developers are still making games because they clearly have a ton of talent. Please comment, thumbs up, and subscribe for more content.